our initial interpretation of the ruling of the Court of Appeal. So, in a nutshell, although APNU once again has been telling their supporters that there is a possibility that the court would annul the elections today, that remedy was never sought before the court. So they were lying to their supporters once again. Two, they sought an injunction, but that injunction was not granted. And three, they sought an interpretation of the Constitution where it says more votes than. That once, and that was Article 177, where it says that any party that receives more votes than any other list that is supplied by any other party, that candidate, the presidential candidate on that list, shall be deemed president and just awaiting a formal declaration by the chair. So they sought an interpretation of the Constitution going to the Court of Appeal to say that the words more votes than mean more valid votes than. So, first of all, we argued that this court had no jurisdiction. I think they were shopping around for courts, and they're hoping that a decision could be made by a court that would not be challenged or could not be challenged to the Caribbean Court of Justice. So we argued, first of all, this court had no jurisdiction to determine any of these issues. These are issues for the Constitution and for the lower court. We also argued that this is, and in fact we have made it public, that this decision on jurisdiction is appealable and may very well end up in the Caribbean Court of Justice. Now, there has been a declaration by two of the three judges. First judge said there is no jurisdiction to hear the matter, and two other judges, from my initial understanding and briefing, have said that in the Constitution of Guyana, where it says more votes than, it means more valid votes than. So they're interpreting the Constitution. Now, on the question of validity of votes, clearly the Court of Appeal could not mean that Lowenfield or any single political party, and in this case APNU, can solely determine what valid votes are. That this has to be determined based on a process. So if you look at, and we are contending that all along this is provided for in our laws, and total valid votes have already been determined by the Commission, and I'll get to that in a moment. So Mr. Granger has been speaking, President Granger has been speaking about a four-stage process in the recount. First stage is that the count is completed. The second stage, that Mr. Lowenfield presents a report along with 10 summaries of the observation reports. So a report along with summaries. The third stage is that the commission discusses that report, and that is the number 14 in the order. It discusses the report and then instructs the CEO on the basis of that discussion and the presentation to prepare a report for the final stage, which is the declaration of the presidency. So you had the recount completed, Mr. Lowenfield presented his report, and the discussions took place at the commission. At that commission meeting, the chair, it was widely reported, the position of the meeting. One, that they had no power to annul an election, which is what APNU was seeking. And two, that only a court can determine or invalidate a vote. Only the court can invalidate a vote. Not Lowenfield, not anyone else. As a result of this, the commission decided to tell Lowenfield to use the recount numbers and to present the report. So I want to show you, first of all, that commission made the decision as to what is a valid vote. And they didn't do it on the whims or the fancies of APNU or Lowenfield. They did it on the basis of the documentary evidence presented to them by Lowenfield. Now, Lowenfield, in the report at stage 2, was supposed to tabulate the matrices of the 10 districts and then present that in a report to the commission, which he did. Now, on each of the certificates for each region after the recount was done, this was signed by every political party except in APNU. In Region 1, they signed it here. But all the other regions, they did not sign. So the political parties that witnessed the recount signed on to this. You have here, I'm showing you an example of one, the tabulation supervisor who was appointed by Lowenfield signing on to it, and the district coordinator appointed by Lowenfield signing on to it. This is the certificate. Now, it starts off with Certificate of District 1 Tabulation General Elections. And the next line, the header, is valid votes cast for each party list of candidates. So that is the title of the certificate for the 10 districts. It is titled Valid Votes Cast for Each Party of Candidates. And 2, as we go down the list, it says total number of valid votes cast. Now, this is the evidence. This is what APNU is trying to invalidate. So Lowenfield and APNU are not trying to determine valid votes. They're trying to invalidate valid votes. That is the issue here. Because and let me go on to say that, so Lowenfield took all of these 10 certificates with all the valid votes, and then he prepared this report and sent it to the commission, which says, this is Lowenfield's report, total valid votes cast, 460,352 votes. This is the total valid votes cast has already been determined by the recount itself and by the certifying officers for GCOM, by Lowenfield in a report, and by the commission when they asked him to now go back using these numbers, the valid votes determined already, and to prepare the seat assignment for each political party, how many seats they will have in the parliament and how many seats they will have in the regional democratic councils. So this matter, this has been settled already by the commission about the total valid votes cast, and it's on the basis of documents prepared, the certificates out of the recount. Not on the basis, APNU wants to invalidate 285,000 voters. 285,000 voters will lose their votes. They want Lowenfield to do that without hearing these voters, without any other documentary evidence, and to change what has already been validated. That is what. And I say that when the Court of Appeal today said more votes mean more valid votes, we agree with that because these were part of the statutory documents. Now look at Form 24, Representation of the People's Act, that was signed by the ROs, and this has been used from time immemorial to validate and to declare the results of elections. This was done on March 3rd. It shows, it has a heading to number of valid votes cast for each list of candidates. And it says exactly the same thing at the recount or the statements of recount, total valid votes for all lists. So this is how valid votes had been determined in a normal election. You do the statements of poll, total the statements of poll, and then do the regional declaration based on a total of all of the statements of poll, and then you come up with total valid votes. It's part, this is part of the law. This Statute of Guyana, Representation of People Act, sets out how valid votes are described. So my contention is that when the court interprets more votes than, and it says more valid votes than, it actually, there is no issue with it because in every case, and the recount itself, all of the people were counting valid votes. And Roper defines what a valid vote is. And nowhere does it say that Harmon's accusations or Harmon's allegations must be considered. Harmon's allegations must be dealt with in an elections petition. And this is how we interpret the Court of Appeal decision today, that it places this back in. It didn't annul the elections. It says the commission has to decide what is a valid vote, and the commission has already decided, when they directed Lowenfield to prepare the report so that the final declaration could be made. They had already made that determination already on the basis of his own report, what he submitted, and on the basis of the recount. Now, when you speak about, and I will deal with the issue about credibility. So that's the first thing. Clearly, the court could not mean that the commission must accept any fictitious number that Lowenfield came up with. This will be worse than what Mingo did. It will be that one man can walk into a room and disenfranchise 285,000 people, take away their votes on the basis of allegations from APNU. This could not be the meaning of the court. And it cannot. The court doesn't have the authority to strip the Elections Commission of its powers of supervision and to declare the results. It had no authority. It would act illegally if it were to say that the commission must rubber stamp anything that Lowenfield brings to them if he brings something outrageous. If he refuses to comply with the instructions given to him by the commission, which says, after the determination, after the discussion we've had, we have decided that you cannot invalidate any voter excepting through an election petition, and that your own submission plus the 10 certificates, the basis for the declaration of the winner. If the Court of Appeal meant that Lowenfield has more powers than the entire commission or can come up with any fictitious number, and we were obligated to live with that, then that will be a perverse decision of the court. It will be patently wrong, outrageous, to say the least, that they could mean that they can elevate what Lowenfield says or what APNU says above the statutory process and the powers of the Elections Commission. They cannot mean that. Because if they mean that, then we have a bigger problem than the one that we're talking about now, because that would not reflect well on the court. Then they dealt with the issue about credibility in the order. And by the way, please have a look at all of these 10 certificates. Look at the Form 24. You will see that in each of these that were signed on to GCOM staff, by GCOM staff, they determine what the valid votes are. They determine at that stage. The next thing is this issue of credibility. Now, in the final word, it says in the order, the amendment to the order, it says declare the final credible count. And they're hanging on to the word credible. The least credible people are APNU. The least credible is Mingo, and Lowenfield, what he is trying to do. Those are not the credible individuals. Not the CARICOM team, which Mr. Granger himself said would come here to determine the credibility of the process, and they have pronounced extensively on the credibility of the process, which they gave high marks for, and the results, and they declared that the recount results must be used to declare the final winner. And that shows the PPP winning. They made that declaration. They have also said that the APNU's allegations, which Lowenfield used to adjust the report, lack credibility. Those are the only things that lack credibility. The entire world knows this, what lacks credibility and not. And so that credible count in the order, it means the recount, because Mingo's count was not a credible count, that Lowenfield had already prepared his report, his count on the basis of Mingo's figures and submitted it to the commission. He had done so already. That was not the credible one. This is the credible one because we went through a public process of determining the figure. So that is the word, the credible there count, differentiates the one prior to that Lowenfield had that he took to the commission, which was not credible, and the one that was done in the public view, live streamed, and done in front of CARICOM team that Granger wanted here to supervise credibility. That is the credible count, and that credible count shows the People's Progressive Party winning by over 15,000 votes. So who determines credibility? It is not Lowenfield, or who we believe is already compromised, and Harman. It is the observers and everyone else who participated in the process. And so we We believe that this matter is back with GCOM. GCOM is, as was indicated, that the chair of GCOM indicated in her affidavit to the court that they can't direct them what to do. The court has no, we believe the court took on a jurisdiction that it didn't have. But nevertheless, even the ruling they had that you have to read that section of the Constitution where it says more votes than, meaning more valid votes than, that the valid votes have already been determined by the Commission and therefore sets the stage for a declaration. And we believe that a declaration should be made shortly on the basis of this. This is APNU trying more and more to delay everything. How, if the international community was not prepared to accept Lowenfield's fraudulent numbers, and there were threatening sanctions then, even without knowing who won the elections, now that the recount is done, and they've seen, the OAS has already made it clear that the People's Progressive Party won the elections. They've seen the recount, they've seen CARICOM saying that you need to use the recount numbers, everyone. That anyone will accept any other government. And I don't know, as I said the last time, what they're hoping for, a judicial coup d'etat, or to drag this out forever. In the meantime, we heard they have recently signed an agreement to sell Gaisuko. We have heard about hundreds, in fact, thousands of acres of land being transferred. Now, they're using the last few days to do all of these things, corrupt acts, accelerated the corrupt practices, giving their cronies and people who are financing these lawyers, etc., giving them more and more of state assets. But as far as we're concerned, APNU can't invalidate 285,000 votes, nor Lowenfield. What they are trying to do is to invalidate valid votes. The valid votes have already been determined by the recount, by the statutory form signed, by Lowenfield's own submission to GCOM, by the commission itself when they directed him to use the valid votes, the total valid votes, and that we would never allow APNU to, and these people who are hanging on for dear life because they hope to continue for a few more months of their corrupt practices. They know that this is not going very far. And so we don't intend to just roll over and die. So I say this to all the democratic forces. We are now discussing with everyone as to whether, and the lawyers have to brief me this afternoon about whether we appeal this to the CCJ, because there is nothing at this point in time we see that would prevent a declaration on the basis of a ruling that the total votes mean more total valid votes, when validity of the votes have already been determined and they have been recorded in all the statutory forms. So there is nothing that stops a declaration at this point in time. No court ruling, no court order, and they can't take away the powers of the commission and give it vested with it Lowenfield or in Congress Place. So we're gonna keep you briefed about that matter, about whether this will end up at the CCJ or not. We know that the CCJ has jurisdiction on this matter. We believe that even this ruling will be set aside, but the ruling itself has not injuncted or prevented or does not prevent GCOM from making a declaration now on the basis of what they had already determined and on the basis of the total valid votes and on the basis of all of these reports. Note they don't mention that in the recount order, it also mentions CARICOM, that CARICOM will submit their report. They didn't say a single word about that, the CARICOM submission of their report, but that also is in the order. And the CARICOM report made it clear, what I said before, that the process was credible, the recount numbers must be used, and the PPP basically, by implication, won the elections. So we'll keep you briefed as we go along. They continue to mislead their supporters so that they can continue. This is a big fight going on in Congress Place about opposition leader, who will be and who will control the assets of the party. They're busy handing out things. Let me say to everyone, that all those people who are now complicit, knowing that they lost the elections, knowing that the ministers they don't have any authority to sign anything but are part of these acts of corruption, they too will have problems with the new administration. We cannot allow the rape of the state assets in a blatant way they're doing it. And a lot of these issues will be addressed expeditiously. Lands that were there for low-income housing, they're busy giving out their cronies, thousands of acres now for a very cheap rate at Ogle and all of the other areas on the East Bank. We're getting a ton of reports about gun licenses. I saw a list of gun licenses that Ramjatan approved. They're almost the entire executive of the AFC and all of that, and others, friends. So that's what they're hanging on to the last few days, as though they know the outcome. So they will try to drag this out through the court and everywhere else. We believe that the declaration should be made now on the basis that there's nothing preventing the commission from moving forward. They had already determined what valid votes were. The credibility of the process has been provided clearly by CARICOM, the observers, the live streaming, etc. APNU letters written to the commission can't serve the basis for any determination of credibility. They have, especially when all of the contents have been discredited. Those they must present in an elections petition. So, as I said before, whilst we believe the court didn't have jurisdiction today, and that could be challenged, and all the decisions they made today, but there's nothing that they said today that will prevent the declaration from being made. Thank you.